Peace, 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 family. The work day is done. Got some work in today. So I got a little free time. So I figured I'd come up here and share a little something, something with you guys. I've been pulling out my books, looking at them. What good is it having books when you can't read them, you know? So again, this is kind of for the people who don't read, need some help reading, just want to sit back and do some other stuff while somebody else reads or whatever the case is. Um, found a Pulled out one of my books. I had it out since last week, but I think y'all might enjoy this read. I'm going to request that I do have a couple pictures here that I put up so that you can see what I'm talking about or what the book is talking about. But there is a part in here where you'll need to write down something, and it's real brief. We're not going to go through anything lengthy or anything like that. But so you'll be able to see these cross references if you would. And then at the end of this, somewhere either in the chat, peace, Sharice, either in the chat or in the comments or whatever, let me know if you want me to continue to read this book. Okay. I know we started out doing Washington Irving, and I may go back to that to look at a few things, but I also got Bacon. Oh, you're welcome, darling. I also have Francis Bacon that's really like gnawing at me because people will say certain things and we'll regurgitate those things because we've heard it somewhere. But to actually read the information and really know what it says and what was said about the person, that's a whole different story. And you guys know that I went and picked up some books recently about the British writers. And so yeah, Francis Bacon is on the table. He has some interesting little essays. Okay, I've already quoted one of his where he talks about the plantation and, uh, you know, transplanting scum or whatever. His words, not mine. Okay, but I think that'll be a good read. So that's on the table. Hey, Fontrice. So I'm gonna give you the title of the book. Okay, the title of the book is actually in the title of this stream. It's called The Origin of Language. It's by Marriott Rulin, Ruhlen. So if you guys want to get the book, if it's a matter of, Navi, I don't want you to read this. I don't know if I can be here. You're inconsistent, whatever it is, and you want to get the book, get the book. I read the prelogue or part of the prelogue and a little bit of the first chapter, and this is an interesting read. Okay, for those of you who may need this. But it is The Origin of Language, Tracing the Evolution of the Mother Tongue. And y'all know I went off on somebody telling them, you failed the language thing. Uh, but y'all know how that go, right? So all I'm going to do is read. I'm going to try to only be up here for like an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. And I don't know how long it's going to take me to read what I'm getting ready to read and put these pictures up, uh, that's from the book. But we're going to do the prelogue on page one. We have, I think, 3 or 4 examples that are in here. And then I want to, if I can, shoot into chapter one, if I can, which I may be able to because that's only on page 17. Uh, let me put this into perspective for you guys as well. You guys know I'm a truck driver, and I'm going to play a video at the end that I found uh, somewhere in my phone, okay? um, Me driving down the road because we getting ready to hit the road again. We getting ready to go trucking, okay? But shit, what was I getting ready to say? Damn, I forgot what I was getting ready to say. Oh, trucking. Okay. So apparently, Trump issued an executive order that English is the official language of America, United States, America, and it's already started to hit. I ran into a man while I was handling some business who said that one of his friends or coworkers or whatever got hit, got stopped by a city cop, not even a highway patrol, got stopped by a city cop, and they had to take the English test. And if they couldn't uh, read English and speak English, they kicking them out the truck right now. Okay, so For the Mexicans who don't speak good English or don't act, speak English, that kind of stuff. And the Indians who don't speak English well, it's hitting the fan right now. And probably even some of the Russians, but I think the Russians, for the most part, speak English. Sometimes it's hard to understand. But that it's a language thing, okay? It really is a language thing. Like I was telling a friend, I said, I'm a veteran. My value just went up. I do speak English, okay? I'm a veteran in the business and family. I'm 3 steps from being a full-fledged owner operator. 3 steps. Hoping to get those done this weekend and solidify things by Monday morning. And we're going to be out there doing business like business is supposed to be done, okay? For this side of the aisle. But again, we're going to read this book apropos because we're dealing with language. So y'all sit back, grab your coffee, eat your food, whatever, whatever. And I'm going to try to keep the cursing down to a minimum because I'm just going to read. But the last song that I'm going to play at the end of this, it will have some curse words in it. So if your children are in the room, um, or you got sensitivities, make sure they're not here for that last outro. Okay. Hey, focus mine. All right. So Um, just to let y'all know, I have my TV on so I can see the screen much better than looking at this laptop. And I wanted to make sure that you guys could see the illustrations that are put up here. So what I'm going to try to do is leave that illustration up so that you guys can copy it down. Okay. And I'm going to try to do them in order so you understand what they're talking about in here. Okay. There is a letter that I recognize in the reading. It is looks like an O with a line in the middle, and it's actually the TH sound. And then there is another one that looks like a 6 with a cross on the top. That is also the TH sound. Okay. And this may be remedial for some folks, but I didn't take this shit in school, so I ain't got nothing to do for an hour. Figured I'd come share it with you guys. Okay. So let's start this book. Again, we are reading from the prelogue, The Origin of Language, Tracing the Evolution of the Mother Tongue by Marriott Rulin. And in the description, we also have that this is being done under fair use for education, scholarship, and critique. Okay? Yeah, that part. So let's read. Prologue. What do we mean by the origin of language? For centuries, the question of the origin of language has fascinated laymen and scholars alike. Unfortunately, the topic is usually discussed in such imprecise terms that one cannot be sure what exactly is at issue, and several entirely different questions are often confused. In one sense, the origin of language is taken to mean the evolution of the capacity for speech in our biological ancestors or perhaps cousins, such as Neanderthal man, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, my bad, and the celebrated Lucy, who is thought to have lived around 3 million years ago. But because even the most recent of these creatures, Neanderthal man, became extinct almost 35,000 years ago, some 30,000 years before the invention of writing by the Sumerians in the 4th millennia BC, we have no information on the languages or even the linguistic abilities of these early hominids, nor are we ever likely to. Okay. Despite these seemingly insurmountable obstacles, or perhaps because of them, there has been no shortage of speculation about how and when language developed. One popular theory has been that language began with gestures, to which grunts and other sounds were later added, and this expressive stew in turn developed into human language. The fact that chimpanzees, monkeys, and other primates address each other with gestures and calls lends plausibility to this hypothesis, and gestures as a part of everyone's face-to-face language today. But the gap between these rudimentary communication systems and human language is enormous, and how that gap and how that gap was bridged and when and where it was bridged are questions that are not really resolved by the theory of gestural origins, even if it should be correct. Okay? I'm going to try to slow down a little bit. I know I can. Yeah. Okay. How, when, and where. One aspect of the problem of the origin of language is the pace at which human language may have developed. Here, one may contrast a cultural scenario with a biological scenario, though the two are not really mutually exclusive. And there may well have been feedback between the two over a long period of time. According to the cultural scenario, human language is simply a cultural artifact, like knives, clothes, and television sets, that may have developed quite recently, say within the past 100,000 years. There is good archaeological evidence that human culture has become progressively more complex over the time span, especially within the last 50,000 years ago, or 50,000 years. Some scholars have sought to identify the origin of fully modern human language. And um, I'm sorry, you guys. Some scholars have sought to identify the origin of fully modern human language with this cultural expansion, sometimes called the sapient explosion. According to this new view, the possession of a fully developed language would have provided modern humans with a distinct advantage over Neanderthals, whom they replaced. But there is currently considerable debate on the linguistic ability of Neanderthals. Some scholars maintain that they were not capable of the fully modern languages we possess. Often, God, I'm messing up here, you guys. Others, um, that their language may not have been substantially different from ours. So we cannot be certain that language played a crucial role in the disappearance of the Neanderthals in Europe or of similar populations elsewhere. Furthermore, even if language did play a pivotal role in their extinction, it does not necessarily follow that fully modern languages developed just before the extinction. Still, Neanderthals need not be the issue. The possession of language undoubtedly played a key role in the dramatic development and spread of human culture. The biological scenario, by contrast, sees human language as the result of a very long period of evolutionary development, probably going back to our hominid ancestors hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of years ago. According to the biological scenario, human languages spoken 100,000 years ago would already have evolved into an advanced state, one not qualitatively different from that displayed by modern languages. Earlier human ancestors, such as Homo habilis and Homo erectus, would likely have possessed less developed forms of language, forms intermediate between the rudimentary communicative systems of, say, chimpanzees and modern human languages. Say chimpanzees and modern human languages. Okay. Still, it is difficult to imagine what form these intermediate stages may have taken, and we have no way of associating any particular stage, no matter how speculative, with any particular ancestor. We know a good deal about what our ancestors looked like and how they lived, but their minds and languages remain shrouded in the mist of the past. I personally believe that the biological scenario is probably closer to the truth than the cultural scenario, which I find implausible. Human language is simply too complex a phenomenon and too intricately enmeshed with other human cognitive abilities to have developed so quickly or as late in human evolution as the cultural scenario would have it. Another perplexing question about the origin of language is the monogenesis, the theory that all modern languages have evolved from a single earlier language, which itself has generated much controversy and concerning which there are two possible and often confused interpretations. In one sense, monogenesis is taken to mean that human language came into being just once, and that all languages that now exist or have ever existed are or were altered later forms altered later forms of this original language. In a more restrictive sense, monogenesis is taken to mean that all presently extant languages derive from a single common source, but that there may well have been earlier, independently evolved languages that died out. Languages spoken by either other groups of Homo sapiens or by earlier hominids. In any case, because we know so little about language that may have been lost, and here it says, remember that writing developed only 500 years ago, and that even today, most of the world languages have no written form. But it continues to say, we will concern ourselves in this book solely with the relationships among currently existing or historically attested languages. We are forced to leave in abeyance the intriguing question of how and when and where the linguistic ability of modern humans developed, though we should note that these linguistic abilities are surprisingly uniformed across the entire human species today. All normal humans learn to speak the language of their community in the community in which they are raised. What we have in abundance today, thanks to the efforts of linguists and anthropologists over several centuries, is information on the roughly 5,000 languages currently spoken in the world by the sole surviving subspecies of humanids, Homo sapiens sapien, and modern humans. It is the origin of these languages and the relationship among them that form the focus of this book. Peace, Zip. Peace, peace, peace. Okay. I know ZPE, but always call you Zip. My bad. Okay. But let me stop for a minute. Let me stop. I got to read something I forgot from the beginning of this book. I want y'all to hear this, and I forgot. In the beginning of the book, it says this about this publication. Okay. It says this publication is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to this the subject matter covered. It is sold with the understanding that the publisher is not engaged in rendering professional services. If legal, accounting, medical, psychological, or any other expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. Then in bold letters it says this: adapted from a declaration of principles of the Joint Committee of the American Bar Association and Publishers. So I wanted to read that. But let's get back to the main text. It continues on page 4 to say, but what does it mean to say that two languages are related? It means quite simply that both languages have evolved from a single original language, whether recently or in the distant past. For example, we know that Romanian, Italian, French, and Spanish are related because each is a descendant of Latin, the language spoken in Rome 2 millennia ago that was spread throughout much of Europe from Portugal to Romania by the Roman conquest. With the collapse of the Roman Empire around 500 AD, the various regional dialects of Latin, more or less cut off from their source, developed over time into the modern Romance languages. In the metaphor that is usually used, Latin is said to be the mother language, and Romania, Sardinia, Italian, French, Catalan, Spanish, and Portuguese are daughter languages. A group of related languages, however small or large, is called a language family. In this case, Latin and its descendants are known as the Romance family, and Romanian is Rumanian, okay? Not the ROM, but all vowels being interchangeable. Anyway, let's continue. If the question of what it means to be related is straightforward enough, how one actually determines whether languages are related, or more precisely, how one discovers valid linguistic families like Romance, is a good deal less transparent. Okay? Because the language that gave rise to the Romance family, Latin is abundantly attested. Hold on, hold on, y'all. I don't know if y'all can hear this fan in the background, but I sure can. Let's see if that helps me out a little bit. All right. Because the language that gave rise to the Romance family, Latin, is abundantly attested in written records, we can in effect trace the entire history of the Romance family by means of these written records from its origin in Latin, though such intermediate stages, through such intermediate stages as Old French and Old Spanish, down to the whole spectrum of modern Romance languages. Our problem is that Latin and the Romance languages constitute a special case. We rarely find comparable records written in the mother language of other families. What would we have done if Latin had never been written down? And what if the Romance languages themselves had never developed writing systems so that our only knowledge of them would have been the descriptions of the modern languages made by linguists? Under these conditions, which represent the norm for almost all the world's languages, how would one go about discovering the Romance family? In other words, how do we discover relationships among languages that have no written history? Okay. Subsection: how classifications proceeds. All right. Actually, we discover relationships not by looking for them in a direct comparison of, say, English and Chinese, but rather by classifying languages into families. These families, in turn, into larger families, and so forth, in the form of the branching tree familiar from genealogical charts. The relationship of two people or two languages depends on their relative positions in the overall genealogical tree. Were we to adapt the naive view that the relationship of English and Chinese could be determined by an exhaustive comparison of just these two languages, we would probably conclude, after comparing them, that the two have next to nothing in common beyond the general characteristics that all human languages share. The enormous diversity of human languages, English and Chinese, attest it well, has certainly been an impediment toward recognizing the relationships among them by the same, but the same is true of biology. Quote, historically, the extraordinary diversity of living things was an obstacle to the discovery of unifying principles about biology in general and about heredity in particular. Sorry about messing up any words, you guys, and stumbling over this. Okay. Give me a second. Let me put this first picture up for you guys, because this is gonna be the first figure that they show. Let me make sure I got the right one. It's gonna be this one right here. Okay. So I'll continue reading. Okay. It is not easy, after all, to see the relation between a tree and a horse, nor is it easy to see the relationship between English and Chinese, but that does not mean they are unrelated, as is often supposed. If we return now to our original example of Latin and the Romance languages, we can see why it is classifications we seek rather than just relationships. We have seen that Italian is related Mm-mm. We have seen that Italian is related to Spanish, since both are members of the Romance family. But Italian is also related to English, not because English is a Romance language, but because the family to which English belongs, called Germanic is related to the family to which Italian belongs, Romance. The classification embracing all these unusual, mm-mm. The classification embracing all these usually represents in the form of a branching tree as shown in Figure 1, tells us not just that Italian is related to both Spanish and English, but that Italian is closely related to Spanish, one of the siblings in the Romance family, and more distantly related to English, the two belonging to a more ancient family called Indo-European, two of whose daughter languages were Latin and Proto-Germanic. Proto-Germanic, the mother tongue of the German family, was not a written language, so its nature can only be inferred from close examination of daughter languages such as English, Dutch, German, Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish. We cannot know, and this is in parentheses, we cannot know in exhaustive detail the nature of the postulated Proto-Germanic, but we know in part from the example of Latin that there had to have been such a language. That's the end of the parentheses. Similarly, the only evidence for Proto-Indo-European, an unwritten language spoken at least 6,000 years ago, is its several daughter languages, which include Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Proto-Germanic. You guys good over there? Let me check y'all out. Y'all good over there? Okay, okay. All right. And Germanic. Note in Figure 1 that Latin is the mother of the Romance languages, but a daughter of the Indo-European family. This suggests that Indo-European in turn might be a sister language of an even more ancient family. We will return to this question in Chapter 3, where we will examine some of the evidence connecting Indo-European with other families, as well as the reasons for the opposition to such evidence maintained by the majority of contemporary historical linguists. The problem we are now faced with in seeking the origins of language is therefore the classification of the world's languages. It is classification that would tell us which languages are related and how closely. And it is classification at its highest level that would tell us whether or not all presently existing languages can be shown to share a common origin. So how, excuse me, so how does one go about classifying languages? It is one of the goals of this book to show how this was done. But the goal is even more ambitious than that might seem, for I propose to let you, the reader, do the classifying. Yeah, that's why I said get y'all a book. I even write y'all some stuff down. Okay. All right. Um, as it is classification at its highest level that will tell us whether or not all presently existing languages can be shown to share a common ancestor. So how does one go about classifying languages? It is the it is one of the goals of this book to show how it's done, but the goal is even more ambitious than that might seem, for I propose to let you, the reader, do the classifying. Now, before you close this book with a shrug of the shoulders and a lament that you were never good at foreign languages and don't really understand English grammar all that well either, let me assume that none of that will matter. I'm sorry. I might have to go get some more glasses. God dang. Dang it. No, okay. Let me assure you that that will not matter. I'm not going to assume that you know anything at all about language or historical linguistics or classification, though that would help. Human beings are very good at classifying buttons and wines and dogs, and I think you will find that you are surprisingly good at classifying languages too, once I have shown you the process. I am asking you to classify the languages yourself because some of the conclusions we shall arrive at are considered highly controversial, and I think you will be more inclined to accept them if you come to them yourself. Then, too, I think you will learn more about classification as an active participant than you would as an innocent bystander. And perhaps you will also come to appreciate the pleasure to be had in reaching back into human prehistory by the comparison of living languages. Okay, let me proceed. And before he does, I hope y'all wrote that down. I hope y'all wrote that down. Let me get the next one because this is the picture here that uh, that caught my attention when I understood what he was doing. All right. So that one's on the screen for you guys there. Okay. You would want to write that list down right there. Okay. Because that A through L is what you're going to need to write down. Okay. But even if you don't now, you will later if you're interested in this. So the person goes on to say, okay, let us proceed. The classification of language into language families is based on discovering words in different languages that are similar in sound and meaning. It is not sufficient that a pair of words in two languages be similar in sound alone, such as possessing both a P and R. Nor is it sufficient that two languages have words that simply have the same meaning, such as the word for the color pink, or words for the kinship term mother's older brother. Only where both languages use, for example, the sounds tick, T-I-K, tick, to represent the meaning finger, is there sufficient similarity to suggest relatedness. The best way to begin to understand how classification works is to work through a few examples. Throughout this book, you will be shown tables that list words in different languages, and you will be asked on that basis to classify the languages into families. In these tables, the languages will be identified only by letters, A, B, C, etc., and you will not be told what the languages are until you have classified them. Table 1 lists the word for hand in 12 languages. Your task is to classify these languages into language families simply on the basis of perceived similarities among these 12 forms. Since the meaning of all the forms in Table 1 are the same, you need concern yourself only with deciding which forms are similar in their constituent sounds. Parentheses here, you guys. Okay, parentheses right here. It says, you needn't even be concerned with the unfamiliar characters or diacritical marks that linguistics and damn, I almost said Phoenicians. Phoneticians, I can't even say the damn word. Phoneticians employ to render precisely the sound of the spoken word. Your guesses will usually be close enough. And that was in the parentheses. It says, how many language families then can you identify? And what are the members of each? If you classified these 12 languages correctly into 5 families, you have successfully completed your first attempt at classification. The first of the 5 families consists of language A alone. Let me read it again because I know here go the details. Let me check on y'all. Okay. Phoneticians. Thank you. Thank you, DJ, because I was getting ready to call them a whole bunch of things. Okay, Trace. Okay, got you. All right, so let me say that again. If you classified these 12 languages correctly into 5 families, you have successfully completed your first attempt at classification. The first of the 5 families consists of language A alone. since its word for hand does not resemble any of the other forms listed. The second family, characterized by an R-K form for hand, consists of languages B, C, and D. The third family, made up of languages E, F, and G, is characterized by H-ND form. Okay? The fourth family, with the characteristic form M-N, consists of languages H, I, J, and K. The fifth family, like the first, consists of a single language, L, whose characteristics form is unlike any of the others. Okay? I'm going to give you all a little cheat sheet. You're going to want to label your paper A through L. You only got 2 paragraphs to do it in. Okay? It says each of the families in this example is characterized by a different root. Let me read that again. Each of the families in this example is characterized by a different root. For example, something like hand in the family to which languages E, F, and G belong, okay, from which the similar modern form or forms meaning hand have evolved. Since evolved forms are called cognates, a word that derives from Latin cognatus, meaning born together. Let me say it again. Such evolved forms are called cognates, a word that derives from Latin cognatus, born together. Thus, cognates are those words that derive from a single earlier word in a single earlier language, a word that has diversified into similar or even dissimilar forms in contemporary languages. Parentheses. That cognates should be the focus of a book dedicated to twins is thus etymologically appropriate. Okay? And that's the end of the paragraph. Here y'all go. This is the paragraph. Y'all gonna want to write some stuff down. Okay, y'all gonna want to write some stuff down. All right. I propose that we adopt the following conventions for representing a classification. Language families will be indicated by Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay? And languages by capital letters A, B, C, D, etc. Okay? The classification will be expressed in the form of branching trees, one tree for each family. Thus, the proper solution to table 1 would be the tree in figure 2. Okay, which I haven't showed y'all that yet. Y'all gonna want to write this down. The identification of the languages represented in table 1 is as follows. A equals Irish. B equals Lithuanian. C equals Polish. D equals Russian. E equals English. F equals Danish. G equals German. H equals Romanian, and that's Rumanian. I equals Italian. J equals French. K equals Spanish. And L equals Japanese. Okay. Hey, baby girl Slaughter. Peace to you, sis. The 5 languages, do you guys need me to say that again? Or are y'all going to play it back? Yeah, it should be. They mad. They upset. Okay. Hey, Marco Polo. Marco Power. Dagnammit. Okay, I don't see y'all saying anything in the chat. So hope y'all got those. Okay, y'all can rewind it, play it back later. Let's continue. The 5 language families represented are known as Celtic, which is Roman numerals 1, Balto-Slavic 2, Germanic 3, Romance 4, and Japanese 5. Okay? Note that we have correctly identified the Romance family without recourse to Latin. That is, we have been able to isolate 4 of the languages in the Romance family independent of the written records of the mother language. Figure 2. Y'all need me to read that again? Because we're going to switch to this third, I think it's the third. Uh, say it again? Okay. All right. I'll go back to the A through L, and then I'll hit the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, um, language families are Roman numerals, and languages are capital letters. Okay. So here it is again. The identification of languages represented in Table 1 is as follows. A equals Irish. B equals Lithuanian. C equals Polish. D equals Russian. E equals English. F equals Danish. G equals German. H equals Romanian. I equals Italian. J equals French. K equals Spanish. And L equals Japanese. Okay. Now for the 5 language families. They're represented are known as 1, Celtic or Celtic, however you say that, Celtic. 2, Balto-Slavic. 3, Germanic. 4, Romance. And 5, Japanese. Okay. So if y'all didn't get it, y'all can play it back because we're getting ready to switch to the next table. And we're almost done here. We really are. I don't have any more tables I want to show in this book. I just want to drop this for y'all. And again, y'all let me know if y'all want to read it. Shit. If y'all can get a copy, we might even be able to have a book club on this one, or people participate. Um, let me find the next one. What's the next picture? Okay. All right. Here's the breakdown of the. Oh no. Oh no, it's not there. Okay. All right. I didn't copy that one. I didn't put that one down there. So I'm going to have to tell you what this one looks like. So on the top, they have the Roman numerals 1 through 5, right? And I think it might be what we just read here, but so 1 is A, a straight line to A, okay? Roman numeral 2 has B, C, and D in it. Roman numeral 3 has E, F, and G in it. Roman numeral number 4 has H, I, J, and K. And Roman numeral 5 has L in it only. Okay, so I don't have that picture for you guys, and I apologize for that. I think I missed that one. So let's read a couple more. We're almost done here. I'm at 45 minutes. I'm not going to be here too long today. Note that we have correctly identified the Romance family without recourse to Latin. That is, we have been able to isolate 4 of the languages in the Romance family independent of the written records of the mother language. Figure 2, which is what I just explained to you guys, raises a number of interesting issues that should be explored. For example, it would appear from the figure that English E and Italian I belong to different unrelated families. This is, however, a misreading of the figure compare figure 1, because classifications tell us nothing that allows us to declare that various languages are not related. You know what? Give me a second, family. I'm gonna take a quick picture of this because I think y'all might want to see it. You might be like me. I'm a little audio. I'm sorry. I'm a little visual. If I can see it, I can understand it better than a bunch of wordy stuff. So let me see if I can grab this picture for you guys, at least so you can see it. Okay. And y'all hit that like button. Y'all ain't got to be stingy with the like. It don't cost you nothing. So put the like on there and then go back later on and take it off, okay? Because I know it'll be in your like shit. Hold on, let me see. Let me see if I can get this picture real quick. And we'll bring it in for you. And that's just the example that I just showed or just stated. But give me a second. I'm gonna bring this in with my phone. And all of this is done for fair use and, critique and education and all that scholarship and all of that. So give me a second. Let me see if I can get this up here on StreamYard real quick. All right, where, right here. Okay, my TV it does look like that now. It didn't look like that before. I guess I'm hiding behind the little screenshot here. But let me let me try to get this one in here. Hopefully it'll only take a few seconds to get it in here. It's a short one. Yeah, it's in there. Okay, we'll switch. So that's the illustration of the other one, you guys. Okay. All right. Y'all good? I think I dropped myself out. I hope I dropped myself out. But maybe not. Are y'all good? Okay. Thank you, Fun Trees. Thank you. And that book is by Merritt Ruhlen, Ruhlen. Publication was 1994. Okay. Let's continue reading here. Okay. I'll start back over. Figure 2 raises a number of interesting issues that should be explored. For example, it would appear from the figure that English E and Italian I belong to different unrelated families. This is, however, a misreading of the figure, comparing to figure 1, because classifications tell us nothing that allows us to declare that various languages are not related. What the classification in figure 2 does tell us is that on the basis of information in table 1, we may classify these 12 languages into 5 distinct families. This is not a bad start for one word, but it can hardly be considered more than a beginning. When we take additional words into account, as we shall do in chapter 1, we will confirm the classification given so blightly in figure 2, and we will find that it can be refined in 2 ways. First, a comparison of several other words will show fairly quickly that families 1, 2, 3, and 4 all belong to an even more ancient Indo-European. Again, compare figure 1. Japanese, however, will remain apart. Second, the comparison of additional vocabulary will show that the Balto-Slavic family consists of exactly 2 subfamilies: Baltic, Lithuanian, and Latvian, 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 and Slavic, including Russian, Polish, Czech, Slavic, Slovenian, Serbo-Croatian, Bulgarian, and others. It just so happens that the word for hand is one of the characteristic traits that connects Baltic and Slavic to the exclusion of other Indo-European languages. Other words will distinguish Baltic from Slavic. Hope y'all understood that. And I know some of us don't give a care about, the Baltic and Slavic, but we should start caring about certain things. Okay? In my opinion. Okay. We should care more about certain things like language. Let's continue. Next subsection. Why classification succeeds. Remember, this is the prelogue, okay, to the book to tell you what they're doing. Okay. It says now, what we have seen, now that we have seen how each, I'm sorry, now that we have seen how one classifies language and what the meaning of the classification is, let us turn to the question of why this method of classification works. Why should a method as simple as looking for similarities in the words of different, I'm sorry, Tracy, I know you're a little ways away from me, but I think we just had a tremor. I think we just had a tremor over here. Anyway, let me continue. Why should uh, why should a method as simple as looking for similarities in the word of different languages reveal historical connections thousands of years ago? The reason this method is so successful is because it is based on the most fundamental property of human language, namely that a word, any word in any language, is an arbitrary association of certain sounds with a certain meaning. The word arbitrary cannot be too greatly emphasized. As we saw in Table 1, different languages represent the meaning hand by very different sounds. Irish, lamb; Lithuanian, ranka; English, hand, with the diphthong AE connected; Italian, mono; Japanese, te. Okay? If that's how you pronounce all of those. A little reflection should convince you that there are there are literally hundreds or even thousands of possible combinations of sounds that a language might use to represent the meaning hand. English alone employs about 22 consonants and 12 vowels. I thought it was just A, E, I, O, U. Never mind. And sometimes, never mind. Okay. English alone employs about 22 consonants and 12 vowels. So if different languages are found to use the same combination of sounds for the same meaning, it is not likely to be by chance. There are simply too many random possibilities for different sound representations, even if we ignore the vowels, for us to believe that accidental similarities occur very often. Furthermore, the longer a word is, the less likely that chance resemblance will occur. The probability of finding a word involving the same three consonants in the same order, say Malik, with the same meaning in three different languages is much smaller than the probability of finding words with the same meaning that agree in only one consonant, say os, in two languages. If one does find similar forms with the same meaning in different languages, what are all the possible explanations for their similarity? Let me read that again. If one does find similar forms with the same meaning in different languages, what are all the possible explanations for their similarity? In fact, the possible explanation for similarities among the words of different languages are the same as the possible explanations for similarities among proteins, animals, or religions. The science of classification, say taxidermy, is based on certain general principles, not on principles that are specific to the object being classified. Whatever the field, animals, religion, language, whatever, similarities can be explained by just three mechanisms: convergence, borrowing, and common origin. No one has ever persuasively proposed a fourth or a fifth. By the process of conveyance, objects that are originally different have come to resemble each other, either accidentally or because of some motivating factor. motivating factor. In biology, there are many fascinating causes or cases of convergent development, such as that of dolphins, which are mammals like us, and fish, or that of bats, also mammals, and birds. Or my eye. No, I added my eye. Don't y'all charge that to the book. I said that. Okay. Because y'all know she half bird and half reptile. Anyway, never mind. Let's continue. But there is a critical distinction between biology and language, a distinction that makes convergent similarities much easier to detect in language than in biology. The convergent development of bats and birds is hardly an accidental coincidence, for if an animal is going to fly, it must obey the same aerodynamic laws, whatever its biological origin, whether initially a reptile in the case of birds or a mammal in the case of bats. The similar bodily configurations of the two are thus motivated, in fact, dictated by the environment. But as I have already emphasized, the arbitrary nature of the sound meaning relationship in language guarantees that neither the environment nor human psychology or anything else other than the common descent can motivate the matching of certain sounds with certain meanings in different languages. Convergence in language is always accidental, and the chance of it occurring is thus automatically minimized by the laws of probability noted above. Parentheses. Accidental similarities do occur, but the same accidental resemblance cannot be expected to occur over and over. End of parentheses. Actually, always is a bit too strong because there is a small class of words where the sound meaning relationship is not arbitrary. Such exceptions include cases of sound symbolism, like the widespread pattern I near the speaker versus A far from the speaker. Okay, the pattern I near the speaker versus A far from the speaker, or the various onomatopoeic, wait a minute, onomatopoeic or imaginative words like buzz and murmur. Um, I know I probably messed this word up, so let me spell it in the chat. Uh, is it metaphor? Matt, a poet. Let me see. About to give that to the metaverse right there. Okay, that's the spelling of that word. Metapoic, if that's the way that you pronounce it, which means imaginative. Imaginative. Okay. Words like buzz and murmur. The widespread kin terms mama, mother, and papa, father, are also generally considered sound symbolic by most linguists. It turns out, however, that the sound symbolic words, the sole exception to the arbitrary nature of the sound meaning relationship, constitute an exceedingly small portion of a language's vocabulary because they are so analogous, uh, anomalous, so few in number and so vulnerable to dispute. Anat, oh shit, Akuna Matata. Onomatopoeic words are simply ignored when classifying languages. Okay, I'm gonna say all of that shit again. Okay, let me find it. It turns out, however, that sound symbolic words, the sole exception to the arbitrary nature of sound meaning relationship, constitute an exceedingly small portion of a language's vocabulary because they are anomalous, so few in number, and so vulnerable to dispute. Onomatopoeic words are simply ignored when classifying languages. The second way by which different languages may come to have similar words is when a language borrows a word from another language. That English, for example, has so many words that closely resemble French words is due to the fact that Middle English borrowed close to 10,000 words from Old French following the Norman conquest of England in AD 1066, and many of these have survived to the present day. For example, people, beef, crime, religion, virgin, nature, art, sport, beauty, and table. How do we distinguish similarities due to borrowing from those resulting from convergence or common origin? There are two basic techniques that are quite effective in detecting borrowed words. First, though it is true that on occasion any word may be borrowed, it is equally true that in most cases only certain kinds of words are borrowed. The most frequent of these cases is when the name of an item is borrowed along with the item itself, such as the ambiguous coffee, tobacco, and television. On the other hand, such basic words as I, you, the number two, and who, tooth, heart, eye, tongue, not, water, and dead are seldom borrowed and are never borrowed among numerous languages covering a wide area. Thus, when we find that the basic vocabulary is shared by many languages over a broad geographical expanse, we may rule out borrowing as an example or as an explanation. Such mass borrowing of basic vocabulary is not known to occur in human language. When we do find similar words spread out over a large geographical area, the most likely explanation is that these similarities derive from an earlier migration of people across that area. As we have seen, the similarities among the Romance languages are a consequence of the Roman conquest, which spread Latin over much of Europe and at a greater time is that right? Okay. Or at a greater time depth. The similarities among the Indo-European languages are the result of the migration of Indo-Europeans into Europe and South Asia. The second technique is that is used to detect borrowing is to look at the distinction of the words in question in nearby languages other than those involved in the apparent borrowing. We noted above that English and French have many similar words due to the historically documented Norman conquest of England. But would it be possible to know that English borrowed these words from French if we lacked historical records? The answer is yes. Let me read the question again. Would it be possible to know that English borrowed these words from French if we lacked historical records? The answer is yes, and with little difficulty. We begin by observing that however many similar words English and French share, it remains true that in basic vocabulary, English resembles other Germanic languages and French the other Romance languages more than either resembles each other. This by itself indicates that we are dealing with borrowing from one language family to another, but in what direction? Here, the critical clue is that the shared words tend to be characteristic of the Romance family to which French belongs, rather than of the Germanic to which English belongs. Finally, whenever an English word does resemble one of the Romance roots, it resembles precisely the French variant and not the Italian or whatever, which shows conclusively that English borrowed these words from French. Each example, or for example, the English word people is very similar to French papier, P-E-U-P-L-E, and much less similar to other Romance cognates of this root, such as the Romanian popor, P-O-P-O-R, or the Italian popolo, P-O-P-O-L-O, Spanish pueblo, or Portuguese povo. It would thus be clear, even in the absence of written records, that English borrowed the word people from French, because French is P-O-U-P-L-E instead of P-L-O-P-L-E. Okay. If we then eliminate convergences and borrowings by the methods outlined above, the resemblances that remain must be attributed to the sole remaining explanation for such similarities: common origin. The perceived similarities are there today because they have been there from the start. What we are left with is a simple evolutionary explanation of descent with modification, the explanation that since Darwin has been the backbone of the biological sciences. It should be the backbone of historical linguistics as well. In the remainder of this book, we will see Mm. In the remainder of this book, we will see what can be done when common origin is given its due. In Chapter 1, you will be asked to classify languages that are found predominantly in Europe. And in Chapter 2, you will be presented with tables of languages from Africa, Asia, and the Americas. For each table, in both chapters, you will be asked to group the languages into language families on the basis of the evidence contained in the table. You will find that the same methods of classification that work so well on European languages are equally applicable to the languages from any other part of the world. In Chapter 3, we will turn to the classification, not of languages, but of language families, some of which you will have already discovered in Chapter 1 and 2, and you will find that the same principles used to classify languages can be used equally to classify language families into larger or more ancient families. Opposition to the idea that such broader classifications can be constructed will also be discussed. Chapter 4 pursues a similar theme: the comparison of New World families and the attempt to establish more comprehensive classifications of Native American languages. Once again, opposition from the experts is discussed. In Chapter 5, you will be asked to classify language families from around the world and will inevitably suspect that the very wide distribution of certain cognates can only be explained by concluding that all the world's language families must derive from a common source. In Chapter 6, we will make the final attempt to reconcile the abundant evidence for the various ancient families identified in Chapters 3, 4, and 5 with the almost irrational hostility displayed toward the higher level families by traditional historical linguists. In Chapter 7, we will examine the recently discovered correlations between linguistics and biological classifications. We will see that classifications based on human genes, constructed independently of the work of linguistics, correspond remarkably well with the linguistic classifications we have worked out in the earlier chapters solely on the basis of language, and we will see why there should be such a correlation. Finally, in chapter 8 we will consider these linguistic and biological findings in a broader context, one that includes archaeological evidence as well, in an attempt to develop a general picture of when and where modern humans arose and how they spread to the furthest corners of the earth. This book completes or concludes with the epilogue that discusses the work of traditional historical linguistics, work that the traditionalists argue must precede classification, but that in fact cannot begin until the preliminary task of classification has been accomplished. Okay, so where are we at? That's about how much time I said I was going to do. We are not going into chapter 1 because it's going to take me a minute to get to the other. Yeah, we can leave that because there's two bigger charts that are in there in chapter 1. And we can save that for another reading. I don't want to do too much today. Just wanted to come down and, come around, drop this a little bit. Okay. Hope y'all find something that y'all could use. Maybe y'all might want to go get this book. Okay. Because again, the thing that was most interesting about those clips for me, or the things that it showed for me, was this one right here. Okay. Navi, get your ass out of there. Okay. There we go. Was this one right here, and identifying those 12 language families. But there's another chart that's going to show up. I believe it's in chapter 1, or map. And this will be the map. I found that to be interesting. Okay. But I think this is in chapter 1, and we can do this on a second reading. And then we have, I know I'm pissing y'all off by not going into it. I think this is one of the ones that's going to show up in chapter 1. Okay. It gets a little bit more in depth with the language, and also the African languages with a chart very much similar to that. And as you can see, the language families are over to the side, and it's just showing you something about language. Okay. So I don't really have opinions when it comes to this, because I'm learning this stuff as I'm reading it. I'm getting it for the first time, like many of you are. And, you know, I think it'll be an interesting little study to do. At least a couple chapters, maybe 3 chapters. You know me. If you read the first 3 chapters of the book, you'll get the point. you know. Anyway, but this book is about 8 chapters, is what they're saying, with an epilogue in here. And what did we learn tonight? Convergence, common ancestors, cognates, um, and how to group and classify language, just you know on a preliminary basis. And there is opposition out here, but it's not. Okay, I'm gonna be nice. I was gonna say some stuff. I, I think this is a good book for us to read. Okay, at least to add it to Navi study hall. Did you? You just ordered it? Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I kind of struggle with that one, just a little bit, because reading it in my head is different from trying to read it out loud to see how the writer wrote it. Uh, Let me see. Is that chapter 2? Yeah, that's chapter 1. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is a good one right here. So I'm not gonna read 3 books at one time. Okay, I'll save Bacon for another read, maybe tomorrow, because that's going to be a much longer read. I was curious about Bacon, and he's got a history. He's got a history. So, but family, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you took something away from it. Go back and classify that and look into it, because if nothing else, the Moors were the ones that told me the cultures and language. And as I started to look at the scripts, I realized that we can track the human family through the language. And then all hell broke loose when I said that. Okay. But it can be done. And we can get back to some of these ancient languages and maybe find out some real good stuff. Okay. So, and again, this one of them books that I stumbled across. I purposely didn't give y'all the front page of the book. Yeah, I wanted people to have to roll their asses over here and find out what it was. Not you, baby girl Slaughter. Okay, not just other folks. Okay, but anyway, um, so if baby girl Slaughter found it, I know you guys can. And if I don't read it, maybe you guys will. But maybe all of us should read it so that we can have a discussion about language and not a bunch of argument and opinions. And maybe we can learn something. Okay. So, family, it's been a long day for me. I'm getting ready to go fix me some dinner. Okay. And I see y'all around here. Now, this is the part of the show where I say get all the little kids out the room. Okay. And this is probably the part of the show where they're going to actually uh, strike my channel. Okay. But I ran across one of these songs my niece did and I was driving down the road. And I think I want to use this as my outro. I'm going to see if I can edit it a little bit. But we're going to do this and then we're going to get on out of here. You guys have a good night. Y'all be safe tonight. If you don't see me by Mother's Day, to all the mothers out there, y'all have a blessed Mother's Day, blissful, blessed, however y'all wanted to say that. Know that you are valued even when people don't tell you that you are. Know that you're needed even when it doesn't look like it. Know that you are imitated when you can't see anybody watching. Okay? And you lead a nation, and don't let nobody tell you differently. Stand tall, put your shoulders back, put your head up, and walk in the you that you are. So let's get this outro. Peace, y'all.
I'm so sorry for the way you motherfuckers get tricky. Got it, I'ma break that motherfucker. My name's staying they know, but don't get me for the sucker. Cause if you take from me, then we gon' take this to the gutter. I'm so deep, got blessed, fucker, I ain't stutter. Try to touch it, it's gonna be consequences and repercussions. Look, I'm from another world, something like the underworld. They say I'm blessed, that was something like a southern girl. Nothing like no other girl, really, I don't fucking girl. Okay, you didn't know I'm not the one to fucking girl. All the nigga hater wanna hate us. Niggas can't take it when they see them money niggas. We make a whole lot of money, whole lot of money. All we do is nothing but a nigga. All the nigga hater wanna hate us. Niggas can't take it when they see them money niggas.